Good morning, everybody. This is like the ninth time I've tried to film this thing or something. It never quite comes out right. I'm going to try to do a better job this time. But I wanted to talk about our situation in Iraq. Bush is sending more troops against popular opinion and against the Iraq Study Group's recommendations. Everybody says we need to get out of Iraq. Alright, we went in there, we toppled Saddam Hussein's regime, the man's executed, there's no way he's ever going to get control of that country back. So what are we doing there now? Somebody, please help me with this. We're supposed to be ensuring that Iraq has a stable government or something. Mostly our troops are there protecting Iraqis from Iraqis. That's an internal problem. That's something that they need to deal with on their own. But best I can tell, what we're actually trying to get accomplished is to equip Iraq with a stable form of government. The problem with Iraq is it's never ever had a stable government of its own. Never in its entire history. The Mesopotamian people were in control of their own destinies all the way up until the time of Alexander the Great. Since the time of Alexander in the mid 300 BCs, that area known as Mesopotamia / Iraq has always been controlled by somebody else. Always. Between the Greeks and the Persians, they had control of it all the way up until the mid 600s when Muhammad had whipped up the Arabs. The Arabs invaded Iraq. They conquered the area in the mid 600s, and that's when it became known as Iraq instead of Mesopotamia. The Arabs held control of the area all the way up until the Mongol horde in the 1200s. The Mongols had control of it for a while. The Turks had control of it for a while. The Iranians had control of it for a while. The Ottoman Turks had control of it for a while. Eventually, Great Britain gained control of Iraq, and they had Iraq as a vassal state, much like India, all the way up until 1932. 1932 is when Iraq gained its independence for the very first time since Alexander the Great in 1932. The first thing they did as a new nation was ally themselves with the Axis powers of World War II. They didn't want, they severed ties with Germany, but they refused to sever ties with Italy, forcing them to renegotiate with Hitler. So by 1939, 7 years after Iraq had gained its independence for the very first time in history, England had to go back in and take over control of the country because they couldn't afford to let Hitler have the oil resources they knew to be in Iraq. We go through World War II, 1945, and Great Britain gives Iraq their independence back. They give them okay, here, you run the show. So the first thing the Iraqis do is topple their government a half a dozen times, trying to get something going on so they could govern themselves. So in 1968, the Ba'ath Party that Saddam Hussein represented staged a military coup and overthrew the government. Saddam Hussein came into power a decade later. A couple of years after that, they were back to war with Iran. We had to send troops in the early 90s. I had to send them back again a decade later. This country has never ever been stable, and we're keeping our troops there in hopes to stabilize the area. This is going to be longer than Vietnam by a long shot. We did what we were sent there to do. It's time to go home.